professional writers organization located in Rockford, Illinois. We're dedicated to providing resources and education off the page and on the air. Hello, I'm Bob Francis. Today, in-print member Phillip Warden sits down with author Deb Lecos.
All right, thanks for being here, Deb. So you gave me links about some of the articles that you had written before, but I'm wondering if you have done any other writing.
Well, one of the things in terms of writing for articles, for me, it's a great precursor to getting ready to write a novel, or for myself, it's memoir, because in doing that, it sparks information like if I'm missing a chapter in a book. Right now I'm doing a how-to on healing. Healing is always possible. So when I do meditation practices, it's about healing. When I write for Huffington Post or I write for Elephant Journal, it's about healing. So that not only to offer something out to readers, but also to spark my own writing process.
What is Elephant Journal?
It's this great online journal. They've been around for a while. They do a lot of different types of input people can write in. It's a great way to get your own fan base started if you're just starting out and building your platform. They do a lot of it's enlightenment material. That's kind of the coin term that everybody uses is enlightenment. But basically, it's about people learning how to be in the moment and paying attention to their environment, what's happening in the environment. So very about humanity-based articles.
And is it from a bigger company, or is it just a company in itself?
This one guy created it all on his own, and he did it, I forget how many years it's been. I think it's like 13 years. He's been around for a while. I think they have 22 million people that are subscribers. And they put the journals out. Anybody can sign up. Anybody can read the material, and you can decide to be whether or not how many articles you want to read. But it's a great. He does a very holistic way of looking at it. You can get paid as a writer through them. That's based on readership. So the top 10 articles get paid. So it's like $1,000 for the lead article. So it's not just you going there, sending an article in, you get paid automatically, but based on your own readership, your own platform, you can build up that way.
Do you only have 2 articles?
No, I think I'm up to like 35 articles with them.
All right. Yeah,
These are
because the links
2,
you sent me.
Yeah.
For the meditation.
Mm-hmm.
I like this one here. Meditation for the squirrel brain.
Right.
What is the squirrel brain?
Well, especially for writers, the squirrel brain is when, if you've ever watched squirrels run up and down trees when they're messing with each other or going and trying to get acorns or whatever, they're not slow. They don't methodically go and get nuts and stuff. They race around your yard. They race up and down trees. They're constantly swirling around. Well, when I'm having trouble writing, that's because that is happening in my head. So it's, the to-do list, it's all the stuff you have to do, it's how many articles you have to do this week. You're constantly thinking of things that have nothing to do with writing, or everything to do with writing, but nothing about the process of getting the words down on paper. And it interrupts the flow of being able to be coherent in your writing.
Okay, and in here you say you are a body worker. Is that like a body builder or something? What's a body worker?
Body worker is somebody who's working with the structure of the body, like as a manual therapist. But I also do a couple of other things. My company's name is called Body Language. The reason it's called that is because it's the intersection of you and your body. So your communication with your body, what isn't working within your body, what's not working within your spirit, what's not working within your mind. It's that triad of trying to find balance and healing. So my actual practice, my actual work, where the thing that funds my ability to write is similar on the same take of what I write about, which is healing.
You talk about talking to people about attaining meditation, and the common response is, I can't do it. And I'll be the first to admit, I have said that many times before.
It's an interesting thing about meditation because it sounds like it's so easy, but it is. And then on the opposite, it seems like it's so hard. It's both. When it comes to how to quiet the squirrel brain, I try to trick it. Because, I'm a type A personality. I go from thing to thing to thing to thing. I am the worst person to start out meditating. And I was and am the worst person to start out meditating. And it wasn't until I started becoming a body worker where I have to be present with another human being for an entire hour. And I'm not entertaining them. So there's not a conversation going back and forth. There has to be a level of presence and relaxation while we're doing the body work so that they can have optimum healing ability. So that means I have to be present in the room and I have to not be doing anything else and be focused. And that's when I realized that I had a huge difficulty doing that, because focusing on one thing is really, really hard. And that's meditation. It's really, really hard.
And was this through your company, Body Language, you said? What is that company?
It's my own practice, so it's not. I don't have 100 workers or anything. It's just me. But my business, in terms of how I work with people, that's how they find me. They find it through my website at Body Language, and then they come to me for mostly chronic pain and healing, but also meditation practices, and I do drumming and some other shamanic practice and some other types of healing that come together with the cranial sacral therapy, visceral manipulation, and massage therapy.
Okay, you threw around two words that I was like, what? Okay, the cranial what?
Cranial sacral therapy.
Okay, what is that?
Which is kind of great that we're talking about this right now because of meditation, because we're talking about the brain. And cranial sacral therapy is the brain, spinal cord, and the sacrum. That's us. That's our primary essence of who we are. What I say to clients is, you're basically a pair of eyeballs with nerves hanging down, and the rest of it is accessories. It's like makeup. Whatever your eyes are following, they're usually following the direction of the nervous system, all the way down to the sacrum. So if there's a hang-up somewhere in the body, it's being translated into the brain, it's being translated all the way up and down the spinal cord to the sacrum.
So the brain really is what you need to focus in with meditation.
I'd say you need to focus on the whole thing. Think of it as the eyeballs with the neural system hanging down. Because if you broke your toe that day, you're going to be focusing on the broken toe. So it's really the whole thing. And if you can get really good at meditation practice, you're not going to be noticing the broken toe when you're meditating, because you're going to be focusing on something else.
What is meditation to you?
Meditation to me is, I'm also type A, so this goes along with it, is I'm a control freak. So I can't control other people, so the only thing I can control is myself. So for me, meditation practice is about taking control of my experience, whether it's how my thoughts are racing or what I'm feeling, and if that's impacting something I'm passionate about, like writing. If my monkey brain or my squirrel brain is racing around constantly and I can't write, then I have no control over what I'm doing. So for a type A person, that's the worst.
There's many different forms of meditation throughout the world.
Yes.
What are some that you've noticed you like? How they do?
Well, that was my problem. So, I'd tried some of the ways and methods the Buddhist monks had put out. I've done a lot of yoga, and I struck out on all different forms of that type of meditation. What started, first got me going is, and this is because there's more instruction involved in it, is guided meditation. Because in a guided meditation, you're able to go into the process to listen to somebody's voice and follow direction. So in terms of guided meditation, it's a really easy way for people to learn how to meditate. Sometimes it doesn't work, because again, the thoughts behind the thoughts start coming in. But in a guided meditation, when somebody is talking you through the process, like I do one in a meditation group, which is called The River, and I show people how to find the river and get on the river and feel the sensations of the river. And that in itself is a meditation, because they're not paying attention to the room, they're not thinking about what they have to do in an hour, they're only on the river feeling and guiding it. So visually, which again comes to writing, is how I write, is I try to create a visual impression when people are reading it, that they experience it like they're in it. That's meditation if you're doing a guided meditation.
And you said you struck out with the Buddhist monk meditation and yoga. Why is that?
For me, again, I couldn't figure out a way to quiet I need to go to the grocery store and buy milk, and so I was continually thinking about that. Or even in yoga, I was continually thinking, oh, my left ankle is pulling in the wrong direction, and that kind of hurts, and how long are we going to stay in this pose, and when can I'm not stopping that squirrel brain. It wasn't enough focus for me to stop me from doing that. So neither of those things worked.
So they were not guided?
Well, there's guidance in terms of a yoga pose, but I guess because I am so visual, I think I needed to see something in my head to be able to stop the monkey brain thing going. So So when I do a guided meditation, I'm there, taken there, and that's how I focus on the one thing. It's the same with breath work. That's another type of meditation that slowly started to work for me, because if you're focusing only on how your breath is coming in and coming out, then you're able to tune out the other things. Though there are some people that doesn't work for, because then when they focus on their breath, they actually have an anxiety attack, because for them, breathing is primary. And so it'll bring up the reptilian part of the brain where you start thinking fight or flight, and they don't want to think about breathing. And what I'm trying to say in terms of meditation is to start to know what things are that your hang-ups, what things you need to have happen to be able to create a meditative process that works for you.
That does actually make sense, because I practice Tai Chi Chuan, and while we go through the form, we actually learn the martial art application behind it. So that way, while we're focusing on the form and breathing, when we move our hands a certain way, it's like, oh, I'm blocking this, I'm striking. And so that actually paints the picture. And in a way, being able to do that, it seems exactly like writing. You paint a picture for someone, either on a page or with your voice, and then they're able to see it. They're able to walk to that, as you said, river path. And river, get in the boat, and view everything.
And I almost think, there's a lot of argument about what is meditation, and there is the purist. It is you sitting there doing nothing, breathing, and just being in the space that you are. And I think that's the object. I mean, that is the long-term goal. That's the 20 pounds you can't lose, and I finally lose the 20 pounds and it stays off. I mean, that is the ultimate goal. But to think that that is the only way to meditate, I think, is what stops other people. So the process that I found that works for me is be where you're at in that moment with what you're doing. So in terms of writing, like what you're speaking of, I think reading a good book and getting lost in it is meditation, because you are not in the squirrel brain. You're reading a great book that is taking you somewhere. I tend to say not so much with movies or something that's visual, because then you're completely out of your experience. You're not creating the pictures in your mind. The mind is being created for you on the screen. So I don't see it as much in terms of that, because it's not necessarily a naturally occurring occurrence where if you're reading a book, your brain is going to formulate pictures if that's how you read. I mean, there are people who don't read that way. I do read that way, where when I read something, I'm creating a picture in my mind.
We'll continue our conversation in a moment. You're listening to In-Print Radio. We're back. I'm Phillip Warden, and I'm talking with author Deb Lecos. So basically, we've talked about why it's beneficial. But why is it beneficial to a writer?
That's the best part about it, I think. In whatever your creative process, if you're an artist or you're a writer, if you can disengage certain aspects of your brain to the point where they're not operating. So the process of the brain, our origination, when we started, way back when humans first existed, our brain, the primary function of it had one thing, and it was the reptilian part of the brain, and that's survival. That's why we're still here, is because of that part of our brain. That's the part of our brain that knows to run from a saber-toothed tiger, or freeze because the saber-toothed tiger is not really looking at you, or I got no other options, I have to fight the saber-toothed tiger. So that's our primary motivation in everything, is to make sure we still exist. Then the next part of our brain that came out of that is when we started building tribes. So people started coming together in groups, and that became our relationships, and how important relationships were to us. That's touch, that's the connection to other people, that's the now very important thing, like babies being able to survive, they need to be touched. Then the third part that came out of that was complex thinking. So we developed the wheel, and now our brains start to complex think. Inside the complex thinking is our creative process. But you got to see these as in stages, 1, 2, and 3. Primary being reptilian part of the brain. So if your reptilian part of the brain, oh my God, I can't pay my mortgage, is active, it's almost impossible to write, because that part of your brain is hanging on. If you have a deficit in your relationship, somewhere in your relationship, it is nearly impossible to write if that's active, if you're involved in that and you haven't found a way to turn it off. Well, we all have stresses and we all have relationship issues, so how does any writer sit down and write? They find a way to take those two things and not make them in charge. And for me, I found that doing meditation is the way to do that, to access that. Because you do want the reptilian brain, but you want information that's housed in it. That's long-term memory. It's great for memoir writers. Then relationships, that's people writing romance novels or relationships in some of their books. You want to be able to access that so you can describe it and share it with readers.
So the neocortex, that takes from reptilian and, what was it,
Limbic system.
Limbic system. That's how you get those stories. It's not that you're writing with the reptilian brain.
You're accessing, and I see it as like, they're all three working together when it's operating functionally in a way that's creatively successful. It's like you got three people in the room, and all three are helping you write it. So they help you create the pictures.
One person has this last say.
Right.
And that would be the neocortex.
Right.
Okay,
And that,
no, I'm getting this.
Yeah.
I'm starting to get this.
So that's complex thinking, because it's the complex thinker who can make the decision. If the reptilian brain is deciding to run away from the saber-tooth tiger, you're not the one making the decision. It's your reptilian part of your brain that has accessed it and decided. And your limbic system, if that is telling you, all I want to do is be all lovey-dovey in my relationship, I'm not going to do any writing, the only thing I want to do is be in my relationship, then it's not your neocortex that's making the decision. It's your limbic system, the relationship aspect.
So would the reptilian system be for, let's say, I got a letter from my editor saying, yeah, this part isn't that good. And then I kind of latch out going like, no, it's the best thing written ever. Would that be reptilian brain?
Well, you're feeling attacked. And so, whenever anybody feels attacked, then they're in the fight or flight or freeze mode. And generally, if it's not a saber-tooth tiger, we're going to feel like fighting. So, it makes sense. If you can get your neocortex involved, and then you can say, well, this is just their job. This has nothing to do with my value. This isn't like going to impact my ability to produce material. It's not a saber-tooth tiger. I mean, that's kind of what I say to myself when something big, huge happens like that. Is this a saber-tooth tiger? I don't know if you've ever seen a picture of a saber-tooth tiger, but they are pretty, at time when they were around.
Stuff, yes.
Yeah.
I've seen them. It's
terrifying.
Amazing.
Yeah. So an editor is not a saber-tooth tiger. And to me, that's another form of control in terms of meditation. It's another form of control to see the reality of what the situation is and be able to turn the reptilian brain off. Like we were talking earlier before we started on, we were talking about dream management, being lucid dreaming. So this is the same, but now it's lucid living, where you're taking control of what's happening, not only in your dreams, where you can turn around and face the saber-tooth tiger, but in reality, when you know that you are turning someone into a saber-tooth tiger by an instinctive reaction, your neocortex can come in and say, hey, it's not a saber-tooth tiger, it's some guy with an opinion. So you cannot have that reaction.
A lot of people believe that the relationship has to take the utmost importance, that, writing and taking care of everything else sort of goes by the wayside. Is your belief that you should find time in the relationship to just go and write?
This is like one of my primary beliefs, and this comes to the healing philosophy, like healing is always possible. So I believe we're here to be the best possible human being that we can possibly be. And in a relationship, if we want that for the other person, we want them to be the absolute best human being that they can possibly be, then that means we're encouraging each other's creative process, each other's healing process, because people carrying around wounds impacts their relationships and impacts their lives. So whatever a person needs to do in the relationship, if we're both doing it at the same time, healing, creative process, living, and then we bring that together into a relationship, that's the best kind of relationship that you can possibly have. I think it's our responsibility in a relationship to be creative, to heal, that we're bringing that into the relationship, and that's how we have a successful relationship.
I think I can understand that, because there's been times where I have just put so much focus in the relationship that I don't write at all. And then I sort of get cranky. It's like craving a candy bar and pass it by every time saying, I'm not going to have it, not going to have it. And then finally your mind or your stomach, whatever one, is just like, okay, you're going to grab that right now, or I've had it.
Exactly. And that's that control factor again that I was talking about, and finding balance in your life. We come back to the triad then, body, mind, spirit. My spirit is fulfilled by my writing. So is my mind. My body sometimes gets bored sitting in a chair. So there needs to be some balance where I go outside and I'm out in nature and trying to find an access point where all three of us can be happy at the same time. And that brings up, meditation practices. One of the others, aside from what we talked about originally, which was guided meditation, where you visually take someone on a journey inside their minds, is to go out in nature, because nature is a meditative process. So everything we see in nature is a meditation. If you go outside and sit next to a tree and just watch ants, traveling up the bark of a tree, or watch the way the leaves ripple in the wind and you hear the coin-like sound that they make when the wind is blowing through. Listening and focusing on that and all other thoughts going out of your mind is a meditation.
So for your article about the squirrel brain, you talked about how you trick it. And one of those things you talk about is nature, and I'm seeing a lot of nature kind of pop back up. Are there any places out in nature that you like to be in order to meditate?
I do a lot of meditating on the bike path, like when I'm riding my bike, focusing in on just being on the bike path and seeing what comes up. That's being in a moment, forcing myself to, I call it forcing, but I'll say inviting is probably a better way to say it. Inviting myself to just focus on what I'm doing. So the one thing I'm doing is I'm riding my bike on a bike path, and there's a chipmunk that goes across, and watching him follow him toward there. Or, there's a flower that's bending in the wind and coming toward the bike. Paying attention to exactly what I'm doing. That's a practice of being in the moment, which to me is another practice of meditation.
One of the other things you mention is noise. Would music be part of that?
Yeah, this is something I found by accident for myself as I studied with a shaman. Way cool experience. And he taught me about drumming and how you can bring yourself really into that part of the brain that will take you back into your dream state. So you can, and it's meditation, you can listen to a drum beat. Like in this example, I'm going to hit my drum, and so when I do, I'm going to ask you to just listen to the drum beat and follow it in and see if that sound stops the other things. If you have it, try and find out whether or not you can make other noises come in, or any thought, and I say noises meaning thoughts. So try and find out whether you can think of your girlfriend or think about your writing when I'm doing the drum beat. Do with drumming, it's another form of meditation for me, is that it's almost impossible to make yourself think or create. Your brain just can't put it in there. It's trying to process the noise. You're distracting it. So when it comes to meditation, that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to distract those other things until you can learn how to control them. So in a regular meditation practice, if you're a Buddhist monk and that's all you do, you don't have to do this because you've been doing it since you were a child and you've trained your brain to be able to do that. Most of us who take up meditation, say, like for me, I'm 56, so you're taking up meditation in your 50s. If you're trying to do that, you're literally trying to go against years and years and years of indoctrination of keeping your brain busy all the time. And that's going to school, that's all the other stuff that we've been doing. So what we have to do is try and find a way to distract those parts of your brain until you can get to the point that you can practice like a Buddhist monk.
And so do you think a writer should have a drum by their laptop or by their typewriter, whatever they use to write with?
Well, I do. I'm not saying that everybody should, but one of the things you can try to do, you can take 2 broomsticks or 1 broomstick, cut it in half, and use it as like a clicking point to hit against each other, the same as I was doing with the drum beat. And it'll make this kind of smacking sound. So say you're struggling with a sentence or a word. Thesaurus.com is great for words, to be able to pull words up. But another way to write the sentence is to be able to turn off that part of your brain that might be interrupting you if you're struggling against the sentence. So when you take the sticks and you hit them against each other, it does the same thing. It gets you to stop focusing squirrel brain on the thing that you're not able to do. So you focus in on the sticks, the clicks, as they're hitting up against each other. And you do it as long as it takes. What I wait for is a moment where it feels peaceful. Like everything stops, and the only thing you notice are the clicks, or the drum beat, or whatever you're using to make that sound.
With squirrel brain, do you believe that that it creates writer's block.
Yeah, I don't believe that much in writer's blocks.
So you're one of those who does not believe in writer's block.
I believe it's this, what we're talking about. I believe it's the hang-up between the three parts of the brain and that we can have control over it. I mean, there's days I don't write, and it's not because I can't, but I can tell that it's just not happening. I don't call it a block because to me that's like putting a stop sign in front of my face, and then that means it's like real, it's true. So instead of making it real and true, I say that it's not true. So that way when I go back to write again, that stop sign doesn't tend to come back up. And I'll use meditation practice to take a walk, go on my bike, sit and pet my dogs. I'll do something that takes me out of the process and then go back and sit down and write.
We need to take a break, but we'll be back in a moment. You're listening to Imprint Radio. Welcome back to Imprint Radio. I'm Phillip Warden, and I'm talking with Deb Lecos. I was first introduced to people who believe that writer's block is not a real thing at the Madison Writers Conference up in, of course, Madison, Wisconsin. And it was my first time there, and I believe it was Bradford who talked about it during one of his keynote speeches. And he says he does not believe in writer's block. He just believes that when you get stuck on a part, it means things are getting good. And what he likes to do is he likes to, as you said, go out and walk and just be in nature or just write something else, maybe a short story, maybe just relax on a chair, read a book.
I agree with them because, I think when you get into sticky parts, one of the things about writing for me is that I'm pulling stuff up. I'm always pulling stuff up out of my amygdala. That's the part of your brain that has the long-term memory. So for me, memoir, that's coming up. But even for fiction writing, you're still utilizing your experience to create story. So it sometimes is rattling up against stuff that is coming up. And that's a part of the creative process because the best art comes from our pain, comes from our discomfort, comes from the things that are difficult for us. So I agree with them.
If I could, I'd like to read a little bit from your article, The 10-Minute Timeout Solution for Stressful Moments. The first sentence in here is, in overwhelming situations, our brain does a freak dance, like the one in the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Something without purpose, song, or speech, just as one long, unending screech. When that occurs, we are not solution-based, we are problem-based. What is solution-based and what is problem-based?
Well, in problem-based, if you look at the world right now, I think you can see problem-based. When you're focusing on problems, you're not focusing on solutions. Problems are background information, but they're not solutions. And how better to resolve our own pain, our own healing, or even our community issues than to be focused on solutions. And I think that's one of the things that I got from meditation is finding a solution for my own squirrel brain. Instead of fighting against it, instead of being mad at it, instead of trying to choke the squirrel and stop it from running in my brain, I instead developed this technique for myself to be able to quiet it, to let it be more functional for me. Because the squirrel brain has purpose. It's constantly trying to find escape, constantly trying to get those nuts. It's constantly trying to generate some kind of movement of some sort. It's not that it's a thing to destroy, it's a thing to incorporate. So when I think about problem solving and solution-based thinking or problem thinking, is that problem thinking ends up being that squirrel unending, running up and down frantically, screaming that there's not enough nuts. When the squirrel finally goes into hibernation mode, it's not screaming for more nuts. It's going into hibernation mode and it's feeling satisfied, it's feeling content with what it has. So it got its solution, it found a solution for itself. I raced around all spring and I raced around all summer, and now coming fall, I'm getting the last nuts that I need, but I am going to be able to relax and have my hibernation time during the winter. I'm not going to be dreaming about nuts. I've got the nuts. So that to me is solution-based thinking. That's, you see a problem, you find a solution, and then you look back and you say, wow, look at that, 1 + 1 = 2. It's solved. I'll go on to the next thing. And for a writer, that's how does the story going to end? Can you get it to an ending? How many times have we heard our friends say, I've got this book and I just don't know how it's going to end and it's driving me crazy. Well, are you at the end yet? You're not at the end yet.
Patience.
And follow it. Follow the story to where it gets.
Do you have any techniques or anything else besides the drum that could maybe help us?
Yeah, I've got a couple of breathing exercises that are really awesome. The one is, I want to explain that it's incredibly obnoxious because it's supposed to be, but I'm not going to do it in the obnoxious state. I just want you to imagine it obnoxious, but it's an expelling breath. And this one is another one I learned from the shaman. And the expelling breath is about getting stress or the squirrel brain, getting it to leave yourself. So leave the room. So if you're writing, you don't have a drum, you don't have your drumsticks or the broomsticks to be able to hit against, then you'll do this thing of the expelling breath. And what it involves is focusing on the things that are distracting you. So whatever it is, I got in a fight with my girlfriend, I don't have enough money to pay my rent this month, I've got, this story that's got to be done by tomorrow, and so I'm feeling the anxiety of that. Whatever those things are, pull them into your thought processes. For me, I have to visual, because I'm the visual girl, so I have to visualize them in my head, and however you feel that. Some people feel in their body like this tight anxiety feeling around those things. You pull that all in so that it's hyper-focused. And that's the only thing you're thinking about. Again, it's like a meditation, but now it's on the things that are stopping you from being able to meditate. And you suck those in at the same time as taking in a big, huge breath. Now, I do this outside, or I open a window, because I have this belief that as you're letting these things out, it's like you're letting out a swarm of squirrels, right? So I don't want them in my house. So I open the window so they'll go out in nature and do what they need to do. So you take in the big, huge breath, you focus on that thing or those things that are making you crazy, and then you hugely express it in a big, huge, it needs to make a sound that sounds like a really loud. It's got to sound like you rattled your windows. And picture those things that you've been focusing on leaving you and going outside. And I've taught dozens of people how to do this, and I have yet to have one person who didn't have a thing that was like messing with them over and over, who didn't have it leave away. I mean, it's been successful for things that are even like really drastic, people losing their jobs and worrying whether or not they're going to get another job, and because that worry can impact whether or not they find another job. And teaching them this expelling breath has changed their experience. It's an awesome tool for getting yourself prepared for meditation and also for writing.
So it's sort of a beginning.
Right. It's a great starting point to clear the slate. If you do that, then I would do another form of meditation. There's a third one that's called a power breath, and this goes back to using breath work as a meditation. And the power breath is a series of inhales and outhales of breath, which I'm going to offer on Imprint, at Imprint, for them to be able to put it on their website so everyone can see the how-to and be able to utilize it. It's a great process. It takes about 3 or 4 minutes. And when you finish the process of it, usually, especially if you're like falling asleep, nodding when you're trying to write or something, this is a great way to infuse a huge amount of power. It's called the power breath. Huge amount of power into your writing, and also get you really hyper-focused on something that you're doing, like a creative process.
Well, that'll definitely help, because there's been so many times where I'm trying to write with the pen, and next thing I know, I'm opening my eyes and there's this long line just from the last letter that I wrote, and it gets so frustrating, because I want to continue, but I'm just feeling so tired from just looking at the paper, trying to think of what comes next. At that point, do you think a good thing for meditation would be to either do that, or maybe to get up and walk around a little bit, come back, or just kind of end it for the day?
I think if you ask yourself that question, the answer always pops up. It's like, yeah, I need to do the power breath, or no, I need to go out and take a walk. I need to get some air. I need to be around something else other than this piece of paper, or I need to, stop. I need to just leave the house and talk to people. I usually toss it out as a question. What should I do? And then I see which one pops up and clicks with me, and then I go in that direction.
So when we were talking earlier, you said you were writing a memoir.
I've actually got 2. They're both in the stages of being edited. One's been through the first editing process. The other one is getting ready to go into the editing process. And they're both on healing. One is it's kind of a crazy journey. It's called 20 Gurus and a Dog. And that one's just about how I started to discover meditation and the work practice that I do and seeing a shaman and all the weird stuff that happens. And it's a fun story, but it's also interlaced with why would someone choose to heal? I mean, you can go through your life and not necessarily have to heal from things that happened to you, whether it's childhood issues or people treated you badly in school or whatever your story is. And the second book is a more in-depth look. I was diagnosed with PTSD. And so when that happened, when I found out about it, I was in an MRI tube, which is the last place you want to know that you have PTSD, and it was brutal. And when I realized that it had taken over my life at that point, I didn't understand how much I had narrowed my life down to this small, safe little place until I got into the MRI tube and I realized it was only something that was new that got introduced that triggered an event. So when I found that out, I went on a deep, in-depth dive into my amygdala, my history, my reptilian fight or flight, because that's PTSD. You know, you're in your fight or flight syndrome place. Not a great place to find your creativity. So just your survival mechanism. And so I went in and did this cool and horrible thing called EMDR. It's eye motioning desensitization and reprocessing. And I'd never experienced it before. And you went to a therapist who did this. And while it was happening, I was taking notes. And so for a 18-month process, I wrote a book while I was going through this process of EMDR. And what I found in doing that, because EMDR is about going into different past events that have happened and our thinking process of past events that have happened, or even current events that are happened, and it helps you resolve these issues that are causing you to think differently or feel badly about yourself or not be able to go into an MRI tube and all of that without some reaction happening. So it's a really cool thing because it's kind of like meditation. It was basically taking the information from my amygdala, from my history, and bringing it to my neocortex and bringing it out to where I could use it in a creative process and write a book. And the book ended up being written in under 6 months. I sent it off to the editor, and it had very little problems with it. So why would a book like, say, 20 Gurus and a Dog that I was working on took 5-6 years for me to compile and put together? But this book, while I was doing EMDR, just came out and flowed and had no problems and had no issues. So what was going on there? Because the neocortex and the limbic system and the reptilian part of my brain were all working in concert together, not only for healing, but also for writing. Great experience. So that book is in the process of the final editing process, like I said, and then I haven't decided yet which way I'm going to publish, but working on both of them at the same time to see which one comes first.
We actually recently had a meeting at Imprint where David Berner said, "Art is never finished, just abandoned." You find someone who reads your book and they're so entertained by it. They're like, "This is good." It's like, okay, I'm done. I'm not going to do anything else. Because you can go back and you can read over your old work and say, "Oh man, I should have done this, I should have done that, and I should have done that."
Because the evolution of the neocortex. First, cavemen, let's say cave women this time. So the first cave women made the wheel, created the wheel. The brain then wants to make a better wheel, right? So now we make rubber and we start making wheels that are go on cars, and so the evolution of the brain. So if you go back and you read your stuff a year later, your brain has already evolved. Your language has evolved. You're already changing how you would think. So one of the best things I heard from somebody recently is accept that this is how good you know it right now. Accept that this is really amazing today, right now. In a year or two, something new and amazing is going to be there, but it won't be this because this will be done. So move to the next thing and create that new thing that's going to be amazing because your brain has already evolved and gone further, and your neocortex is like having a party because you got so much new information over 2 years that you're now ready to write about that.
And when that happens, I don't want to go back to my first book and be like, okay, I'm going to change this. I'm like, I want to be done. This is how good I was then. Now time to write the next one, which will be even better.
Yeah. Love your book at that point because it is a mirror into who you were then.
Okay, let's pause here to take a break. You're listening to Imprint Radio. Imprint Radio. I'm Phillip Warden, and I'm talking with Deb Lecos. Did you keep journals for these books that you wrote?
I would say it was like an ongoing book process, like short stories. So I would write a short story about something that happened, and then I did that on my blog a lot as those events were happening, and then compiling it from it to make the first book, 20 Gurus and a Dog, which that then becomes what the book is evolving to now. Like I'm pulling it together now after accepting that information that it is done. I just need to send it off to the editor and be happy with it as it is.
And did you speak with anyone about writing this book, or did you just write it? Did you keep it to yourself?
When I wrote 20 Gurus, I went through the process of trying to get it published, and oh my gosh, did I get so many rejections. Woo!
How did that feel?
Oh, it felt horrible. And because I really wasn't ready to be published. Not emotionally, not mentally, not physically. I mean, when I think about what I just talked about in terms of PTSD, I really wasn't ready to publish a book. So things that happened, those were gifts. Those rejections were gifts. When I'm thinking about this in terms of probably publishing both of them, and probably at the same time if I self-publish. And if I don't self-publish, I'll publish one self-publish and then I'll go the other, trying to get it seen by somebody. I think that was the best lesson that I could have learned. So I had a whole bunch of people read it, and at the time I picked all my best friends. So yeah, so I heard lots of great things about that book before I went out and sent it out to people, and then heard lots of not so nice things from people who don't know me. So when it came to the second book, which is finished, which is I Remember What You Did, and that's the second one about EMDR, that book, I sent it off to 40 of my people that I know but are not my friends. And I heard back really amazing feedback in terms of what they got from it, whether or not it started a healing process for them. My message was much clearer. It wasn't as convoluted as it was in the first rendition of 20 Gurus and a Dog. I learned a lot from that in terms of valuing people being honest in their evaluation of the work and accepting that this great Dan Blank, he just did a thing for the Writers' Conference in Madison. He just did a webinar for people who had gone to the previous conferences, and I had worked with him. He's a marketing guy, and we were talking about marketing and how important it is and all of that. And his message was about names, because we were talking about book names and all the things you do in terms of platform building. So we were talking about names, and he said, and I gave him a name, and he said, okay, tell me about that name. And I said, well, I just think it's a really good name, and I think it says everything I want to say. And he goes, but what does it say? I mean, what's the thing you want to say? And so I started explaining everything. And he said, here's the thing about names, Deb. He goes, if you have to explain it, and you have to explain it more than once, then it's probably not the right name. And so that's the same thing for a book. If you have to explain it to people, then it's probably not ready to be read.
But what about when they ask for your pitch? They want you to explain the book to you.
Right. So you have to be able to explain it. And you have to be able to explain it, which means that book is ready to be read. If your pitch is clear, and if they understand it and they get it right off the bat, your book is ready. Whether they choose to publish it or not, or you self-publish. But if you can tell people about your book without looking back at the book and tell them why you wrote it and what's the best thing about it and how it hits people, that book is ready to be published.
With his help, did you learn how to explain the books?
Yeah, he's from We Grow Media, really awesome guy, and yes, it was a valuable experience. I had to step out of myself financially because I had to think about how much it was going to cost, because it's a stretch if you're a fledgling writer who's not making any money writing. I was able to do it, and it was the best investment I've ever made in terms of being able to know what I need to do for my platform. Was it easy? No, it was hard. It was grueling. He taught me a lot. I learned a lot in the 4 months that I worked with him, and I highly recommend it if you're going to, especially if you're going to self-publish, because to put your book out there without the backing that it needs, which is you knowing how to do marketing and being able to be brutal with yourself, because we have our egos, so we're trying to do whatever we think is right for something. We need to see it in the big picture. That's market samples and getting people to listen, see how many people are listening to your messages. That's Elephant Journal. How many people are reading what topic? Which one are they wanting to go after? Huffington Post. Which ones did Huffington Post publish on their main page? Which ones did they not touch? So understanding that not everybody's going to like everything that you write, but you can use the information to be able to help you figure out what your marketing plan is. So it was really hugely valuable.
Was there anything else that you got from the conference that helped you with your books?
The Writers' Conference, I went 3 times, and I got something out of it every single time. Totally worth it. Lori Shearer and the group there, they put on a really great program. I didn't realize how much I got out of the first one until I went to the second one, because then when I went to pitch again, I pitched the first time and then pitched the second time, how much difference it was in the first to the second time, and then how much different to the third time. Almost got picked up by an agent the last time I was there. We were in back and forth conversations about it, so it was really close. So that's with the third time. And so I recommend anybody that's writing right now or is going to put their book out there, whether self-publishing or going to an agent and going through traditional publishing, to go to a writer's conference. You get so much from the speakers, and that's where I met, via a webcam, but that's where I met Dan Blank and then ended up working with him. And then the friendships you make, like meeting you guys. And
Networking.
yeah, through Imprint. That's how I met everybody at Imprint, was at the writer's conference. So
And now you're on Imprint Radio with WBOM.
exactly.
Did you have to meditate before you gave your pitch, or did you just go in there and say, I'm going to do this?
I meditated, and before every single one of those pitches, I did 5. So I meditated before every single one. The first time that I went to the writers' conference, I did not meditate, and it showed. It was not pretty. It was me sweating into the person who didn't know me, and I'm literally dripping in sweat, and I'm run-on sentencing and skipping around and not knowing what I'm talking about. I'm almost hyperventilating. I think they were more worried about me than they were ever thinking about publishing anything. So by the time I came the second time, I started getting my thoughts together about how I needed to approach this. I needed to approach it like I would writing or my business, because that's what ultimately writing is it's a business. It's a creative process, but it's a business. So I needed to treat it that way, including how I present myself at a pitch. Who wants to publish a book where someone looks like they're drowning in sweat and having anxiety panic build? How are you going to sell your book? How are you going to do a book signing? How are you going to, none of that. You're not going to be able, that's what their thinking is. So your book could be really amazing, but if they can't get through what you're presenting in front of them, then it's not going to happen.
I've never pitched before. I've always been nervous because I know precisely that I will be like that. I'll be sweating, hyperventilating, run-on sentences. I will not have a pause anywhere. By the time I get out there, my face will be blue, and I'll be like, okay, I think it went well.
Yeah, well, this is the part where intention becomes everything. So what I heard you saying was a story about what will happen. So that's almost like setting it in motion. So back up. Set the intention that it's going to be brilliant, that you're going to share your story, it's going to be amazing, they're going to love it, and that you're going to present it in a way that they can understand and they're going to want to know more about you. Then do your meditation, with that being your intention before you go in and pitch.
And what was your successful pitch? How did you present it?
I told a story. I completely broke with protocol because the protocol was hanging me up. I see for people who have trouble talking one-on-one with people, and that's not a bad thing, it's just a true statement about meeting strangers and talking to strangers, having a tagline and a pitch line and being able to go in and use that. I use it as background information for myself, like I set that as the stage, and then when I went in, I told the story, and told the story of the book, and why I wrote it, what happened to me, and then that MRI too. And every single one of them asked for pages. So I think storytelling is the way to get books published, because that's what we're doing. We're writing stories. If we're going to go in front of a pitch or an agent, or even to send in a query letter, I think that it isn't about just the sell. It's about captivating someone with story.
I cannot tell you how many people that I have spoken to and interviewed who have told me I followed everything to the letter, the protocol, the query letter, everything. Bull Garlington. I remember him telling me he had queried so many people, all rejections, and so finally and they tell you never to do this. He's like, listen, you're the last person that I'm going to, everyone else has rejected me, so you know what, you either like me or you don't. And he sent it off, and the guy said, hey, send me some stuff. It's so amazing that when you break from protocol and, find your own groove into that, doors start opening up for you.
That's trusting your gut. The only way to access your gut, in my opinion, not the only way, but a way of accessing your gut is meditation. because then you're listening to your inner voice. That's what the creative stuff that's getting on the page, and you're going to trust what, the information that you get from other people, successful, amazing people, that's how they made it. And that's how they made it. I mean, I'll repeat that. That's how they made it. And I use that as background information for myself. Again, like I said, background information. It's so great to go to writers' conferences and you get so many great tips. And I use them. Everything I got from Dan Blank with We Grow Media, I use every single aspect of it. But I Debizize it, I Debify it, where it becomes me plus what they gave me, and then see where that takes it, because at the end of the road, the only person you've got to trust when you're writing, or even when you're pitching your book, is to trust yourself, what you know, and what's right for you, and what's right for your book.
With the pitch, with the successful one, when you spoke your story, did you notice the person kind of lean into you a little bit?
It's a huge thing to know tells. To know when someone wants you to wind it up, to leave them alone, that they're already looking at their notes, that they're moving on to something else. You're probably not going to ever make that person want to read your book because they've already decided that whatever those first few words for them didn't work. And then there's the ones who the first few words out of your mouth totally resonated with them. It's like you looking at a book jacket and you pick a book up because that picture resonates with you. It has nothing to do with you. It has even nothing to do with your material. It has to do with the fact that that person at that time, hearing what you had to say, wasn't for them. Which makes it easier when you go into a pitch to know that there's going to be people who are going to love your book or want to hear more of what you have to say or see your pages, and there's going to be people who don't. And there's nothing you can do about that. I don't care how good your book is. You might get all 5 of them to say that they want pages back, but not all 5 of them are probably going to say, yeah, unless you're that Harry Potter book. So unless you're that, in all likelihood, you're not going to get that. You're also not going to get every single person to want to read your book. So the idea for yourself to help you feel confident when you go out and pitch is that that's okay. They don't have to want to read it. You just have to know that you want to present it, and that you will eventually meet with somebody who is going to want to publish your book, or you're going to publish it yourself, but you will find readers. I mean, that is the process of getting your words out there, especially with your intention, like what you said. I'm a writer and I want to share my words out into the world. So putting that out there, putting that intention out there means, in shamanic terms, like from the shaman I learned, make it so.
I think that was Captain Jean-Luc Picard.
Yeah, he was another one. And so shamans say it too. So they all say it, yeah. It's like,
they must be Star Trek
yeah.
fans.
Probably.
Well, I am very thankful that your journey led to you here today to us.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad
Thank
you
you
asked
for joining
us.
us.